Today, I'm going to talk about a topic that is really close to my heart because I've gone through it twice on both sides of the spectrum, and that is the deconstruction process. I'm going to talk very honestly about my experience. However, I will not be mentioning any details related to anybody involved aside from myself and my husband. My husband and I both attended church when we were dating and engaged. And then a couple of months into our marriage, when I was pregnant with our first child, my husband suddenly stopped attending church. I was completely blindsided. I had been taught growing up in Christianity that in order to have a healthy marriage, both people had to be Christians. And I had envisioned myself my entire life marrying another Christian and raising my kids in a Christian church with my husband by my side. And in an instant, all of that was taken away. My husband did not feel comfortable to open up to me about why he had deconstructed or what was going on within him. And I was at fault for that. I was very judgmental of him. I didn't even try to understand his point of view because I assumed I'm the Christian, I'm right. I have it right. We have the answers. And I had had it ingrained in me for so many years that people who leave the faith are deceived and they're going down a bad path. And how could my husband do this to me? I just couldn't understand. I was very hostile towards anything that he had to say. I remember a few times of stomping out of the room and slamming the door when he tried to talk to me about different interpretations of Bible passages. I joined in conversations behind his back with other people about how could this have happened and why is he doing this and what can we do to get him back on track. It was very difficult for me because suddenly the thing that was most important to me, which was my faith, was not shared by my life partner. And I found myself in a situation where I felt like, what am I doing with my life now? What am I supposed to do? I had to pivot and figure it out. I took it upon myself to make sure that my kids would still be raised in the Christian church. And I exhausted myself dragging them to church by myself every week. But yet I saw myself as the hero, as the good guy, because I was doing it alone. Then, several years down the road, I was the one deconstructing, and I got to experience everything from the opposite point of view. I watched helplessly as people around me were in turn blindsided and devastated by my decisions. Remembering how I had felt when I was in their shoes, I did my best to reach out to them and initiate conversation, saying, I understand how you're probably feeling. If you'd ever like to sit down and talk, I'm available. Very few people took me up on it. Most people did to me what I had done to my husband. They talked about me behind my back, about how I was such a strong Christian and how had I fallen so far. I was the one taking my kids to church by myself. How had I become so deceived? How tragic this whole thing was. I handled it all very well for a couple of years, and then I crashed. And I began dealing with a lot of guilt over how my path had affected everybody else. And with that, a lot of fear, a lot of anger at what had happened in my life. I had to take a year break from being behind a camera just to work through all of this. Now, looking back on the process, I'd like to offer my reflections. And this is what I'd like to say to those of you who have somebody close to you in your life going through the deconstruction process. What they need for you is to stop relating to them as Christian and non-Christian or saved and lost. What they need is for you to relate to them as human and human. What a person who is deconstructing needs is unconditional support. They've already lost their entire foundation, which was likely based in their faith. Many people who are deconstructing feel so lost and so alone and so scared as their foundation shifts and moves under them, and as they call into question so many things that they took for granted as absolute truth for most of their life. The last thing that they need is their support system crumbling too, and yet that's what happens to most people. There's a passage in the Bible that makes things really difficult here, and it says not to be unequally yoked. And how that's often interpreted is that you can't be in close relationship with people of other beliefs. Unfortunately, when you go into a relationship with that attitude, it doesn't matter how many times you tell people that you still love them, even if you disagree with them. They aren't going to feel your love. What they're going to feel is that you now view them as not on the same page with you, as not able to have a close connection with you anymore. They may feel a loss of respect. People who are deconstructing do not want or need you to pray them back into the fold, to invite them to church events to try to get them back around a Christian influence, for you to make comments meant to plant a seed and get them to think about things. Talk to other people about them in the name of asking them to pray or to think about them or see them differently in any way. What a deconstructing person needs is unconditional love and support. They need to hear, I love you and I support you. You don't have to agree with their beliefs, but you have to be able to support them and their beliefs and their lifestyle and be okay with it being different from yours. And this is really, really hard for a lot of religious people because the nature of religion is to say if somebody disagrees with me, then they're wrong, right? If they're wrong, then I can't support that, right? To truly accept somebody of a different belief system, you have to let go just a little bit of your rightness. You have to move past the religious divides. And if you can't be confident, then at least trust that this person's experience and viewpoint is just as valid as your own. You have to learn to somehow be okay with this person being who they are and believing what they believe and living how they feel it's appropriate to live without any ulterior motive to change them in any way, ever. How do you do this? Well, if they're open to it, ask them to share. Many people who are deconstructing do not have anyone to talk to about their experience, including their family, friends, and even their spouses in many cases. And they would love for somebody to show a genuine interest. So listen and ask questions and be curious, not for the point of hooking them back in, but just simply to understand a different perspective than your own, to broaden your mind, to offer support and validation. One of my biggest supports is actually my Christian sister who does not agree with everything that I say. The reason why we have remained so close is because we are able to talk. She will ask me questions. What do you think about this? How do you interpret this? And I'll ask her questions about her beliefs and the teachers that she listens to and the church that she attends. If you cannot bring yourself to be curious or to genuinely support someone else's experience, my advice is to at least let go of the burden. One thing that I've noticed after being on both sides of this process is that religious divides and religious deconstruction specifically causes so much needless turmoil for people. When my husband deconstructed, I was devastated, thinking that he was on his way to hell. And then when I went through the same process, I saw so many people devastated on my account. And I just wanted to reach out to them and tell them, please lay down that burden. You don't need to carry that. Let it go and try to find some peace with the way things are. And if you're religious, trust the God that you say you believe in, that he's big enough to handle this. That maybe things will be okay for that person in the end, and that you don't need to spend needless time worrying about this. You can probably hear my cat meowing. She just woke up from her nap. And now to the deconstructing person who is dealing with the collapse of their community and the bewilderment and shock of other people in their life. I would say try as much as you can, depending on your situation, to offer two things: understanding and communication. First, understand that it's very difficult for a Christian to watch somebody that they dearly love walk a different path. If you're a deconstructing Christian, I don't have to tell you this. You already know. To a Christian, their faith is the center of everything about their life. And to lose someone from their faith is almost like losing a loved one to death, because They believe that person's going to be separated from them eternally. They are terrified for you and they're grieving a deep loss for themselves, and they're allowed to feel those feelings and work through them at their own pace. I often find it helpful rather than blaming the person to blame the religion. Religion is what is causing the divides here. Those people didn't, in many cases, ask to be raised in the religion they were or indoctrinated with the teachings that they were taught. And now they're left to deal with this and work through this, and they need compassion just as much as the person deconstructing does. Remember that even though you no longer agree with their beliefs, it doesn't make them wrong. Okay, the point is to get past this idea that we are right and so is wrong, and therefore it's okay to judge them. We don't want to judge them for their beliefs any more than we want them to judge us. They have very good reasons for believing the way that they do. And at this point in their life, that's what makes sense to them. And when I was deconstructing, one thing that I was tried to be really mindful of is that I didn't want to shake anybody else's foundation, because when you deconstruct, your foundation completely crumbles. And that can be really difficult. And I didn't want anything that I said about my changing Christian beliefs to negatively impact somebody who was a Christian who maybe wasn't ready for that change, maybe never would go through that change. I didn't want to rip the foundation out from somebody else by talking about why I no longer believe the Bible is the only inerrant word of God, for instance. So I'd always give qualifications before I said something like that. One thing that I see a lot in the online New Age and deconstructing communities, which are often filled with former Christians, is a lot of disregard for people who are still religious, complete intolerance toward people who still have religious beliefs. And while I do understand that a lot of these people were deeply hurt by religion, and these people who have been through these hurtful things are allowed to feel angry and are allowed to go through that process of feeling what they need to feel, the goal is to not continue the cycle, right? And to offer at least a little bit more compassion than what we may have been given. Don't deconstruct just to make a new religion out of your new beliefs and keep the same fundamentalist mindset about it. Let's create something better. Let's work towards the goal of overcoming religious barriers altogether. And that means that both sides have to offer compassion and care towards each other. Let's leave the division within the religious systems and let it die out as we rise above all that. Secondly, communication can be really helpful. It never hurts to reach out and say to your religious family and friends, hey, I know my deconstruction process has been hard on you, and I want you to know that that's not my intention, and I am here to talk if you would like to. If you feel mentally and emotionally stable enough to do that, if you feel that there's some chance of reception, but at least setting the stage and offering that as an option. I think the number one point to keep in mind when you're going through either side of this process is that it is not about who's right and who's wrong. Some people are going to have a really hard time with that statement. If you're religious, you have been taught that it is about being right. It is about believing the correct belief system so that you don't end up in hell. You've been taught that there's dire consequences for getting it wrong. But think about it. There's thousands of different religions in the world. If it is about getting it right, what are the odds that you and your group have it right? What are the odds that any of us have it exactly right? What are the odds that the Creator, God, Source, whatever word you're comfortable with, what are the odds that the Creator is actually going to judge us upon being born into or stumbling across the correct belief system? Might God's standards be based on something that's a little easier for us to get right, like the state of our heart, or how we treat other people, or what we do with this life experience, this world that we've been given? In this case, it's far more important how we treat people of other belief systems than it is whether or not we're in the correct one, because there is no correct one. In this case, we're wasting our time by trying to desperately get somebody back into the fold or judging anybody else that's still in the religion that we left. The point is not whether somebody is a Christian or a Buddhist or an atheist or a New Ager. The question is, can a Christian support a Buddhist? Can a New Ager support a Christian? Can we bridge divides? Can we navigate our relationships in a way that causes us to have less discrimination, less hurt, less misunderstanding? The opportunity that these difficult situations provide for us is spiritual evolution, evolving past religious barriers and coming together as humanity to create a peaceful, loving, harmonious world. This does not require that we share each other's beliefs, but it does require that we see, accept, and support each other in those differences. Thank you for watching.